The legends spoke of a warship unlike any other, a monstrous behemoth crafted from nightmares, shrouded in myth and disbelief. They laughed at the stories, dismissed them as children's tales meant to frighten the weak-minded. But the whispers never truly died. Some claimed the ship was forged by ancient hands in the heart of a dying star. Others said it was a ghost vessel, crewed by the damned, sailing eternally in search of vengeance. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. No one who saw it ever lived to tell the tale. When the alarms blared across the outpost, no one panicked at first. False alerts were common, especially with outdated sensors that were prone to malfunctions. But when the sky split open and darkness poured out, dread filled the air like poison gas. The officers on duty were the first to see it, a silhouette against the stars, monstrous and ancient, a colossus that seemed to drink in the light around it. Their laughter died in their throats as the air turned cold, and a hum of unnatural energy washed over the base. They scrambled to make sense of it. It was impossible. Nothing that size could remain hidden, not with the technology they possessed. Yet, there it was, hanging in space like an omen. The hull was blacker than void, broken only by faint lines that pulsed with a blood-red glow. It looked like it was alive, pulsating like a heartbeat. The ship was no ghost. It was real, and it was watching them. Panic spread like wildfire. Orders were shouted, commands echoed through corridors, but no one knew what to do. They had no data on this thing, no protocols for a nightmare that was never meant to exist. Their weapon systems went online, targeting the behemoth, but they hesitated. It was like aiming at a shadow, an apparition that could not be harmed. Then it moved. A slow, deliberate advance, its massive form slicing through space with a terrifying grace. The glowing lines along its hull brightened, forming symbols no one recognized but instinctively feared. Ancient runes of war and destruction, radiating an aura of malevolence. A voice crackled through the communication channels, distorted and hollow, as if echoing from another dimension. It spoke in a language that hurt to hear, syllables that twisted the mind and chilled the soul. But the message was clear: surrender or perish. They fired. Every cannon, every missile, every ounce of destructive power they had was thrown at the monster. Explosions rippled across its hull, blinding flashes that should have shattered any ordinary ship. But when the light faded, the beast remained, untouched and unmoved. The runes flared brighter, and the air grew colder still. Then came the counterattack. Red beams lanced out, cutting through their defenses like paper. No shields could stop it, no armor could withstand its fury. It was as if the universe itself obeyed this ship, bending to its will. The outpost crumbled, ships exploded, and men died without even a chance to scream. The survivors tried to flee, but space itself seemed to betray them. Their engines failed, their systems went dark, and they drifted helplessly towards the nightmare. The runes pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat, drawing them in, consuming them. The voice spoke again, a whisper that echoed across the stars. It promised oblivion, a fate worse than death. And as the last remnants of the outpost were pulled into the void, the legends no longer seemed like fairy tales. They were warnings, warnings they had ignored. And now, the warship of nightmares had returned to collect its due. Silence filled the void where the outpost once stood. Bits of twisted metal floated aimlessly, remnants of a civilization that now existed only in memory. The monstrous warship loomed above it all, motionless and patient, as if savoring the aftermath. Its crimson runes dimmed slightly, fading back to a faint pulse. The darkness around it seemed to ripple, shadows dancing along its grotesque hull, feeding off the death it had just unleashed. Far off, aboard a hidden command vessel cloaked in stealth technology, General Voss watched in horror. His face was pale, his hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the console. He had heard the legends, of course. Everyone had. But he never believed them. A cursed warship. A phantom that devoured fleets? Nonsense. And yet there it was, defying every law of physics, mocking every strategy he had ever known. "General, your orders?" The voice came from his second-in-command, eyes wide with terror but still holding to duty. Around them the bridge crew was frozen, faces painted with dread as they stared at the screens. They had watched the destruction in real time, unable to look away as the outpost was erased from existence. Voss's mouth went dry. His instincts screamed to run, to flee to the deepest corners of space and never look back. But he was a soldier. He couldn't just abandon his post, his men. And if that thing kept advancing, no colony would be safe. It would consume everything in its path. "Send word to High Command," he ordered, his voice hollow. Tell them the myth is real. We're going to need the entire fleet." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, do you think it can be stopped?" Voss didn't answer. He didn't know. How could they stop something that defied reality? Something that didn't just destroy, but consumed? He turned his gaze back to the screens, to the monster that hung silently in space, a shadow of death. "Get me tactical analysis," he snapped, trying to regain his composure. "I want every detail. Where did it come from? How is it powered? I want answers." They worked quickly, fingers dancing over consoles, pulling data from the wreckage of the outpost. But the readings made no sense. There was no known energy source, no signature that matched any recorded ship. It was as if the monster was powered by nothing, or perhaps by something beyond their understanding. "Sir," one of the analysts spoke up, voice trembling. "I'm picking up residual traces. It's like temporal distortion. Time itself was bent around the ship." "What does that mean?" Voss demanded. "I don't know," the analyst admitted, panic creeping into his tone. "It's like it exists outside of time, like it was waiting for us." Voss felt a chill run down his spine. Waiting? How could that be? Unless it was hunting. His thoughts were interrupted by another alert. The monster was moving again. Slowly, deliberately, it turned, and its crimson runes brightened, bathing the void in an eerie red light. It was looking at them. "Impossible," someone whispered. "We're cloaked. It can't see us." But Voss knew better. The monster wasn't bound by the rules of physics or technology. It didn't need sensors to find them. It could feel them, their fear, their helplessness. It was drawn to it, feeding on it. "Get us out of here!" he barked, his voice cracking with urgency. "Full retreat now!" Engines roared to life, and the command vessel lurched forward, racing away from the nightmare. But the monster didn't pursue. It watched, patiently, as if knowing there was nowhere they could run. The runes along its hull pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat, counting down the moments until they met again. Voss didn't dare look back. His mind raced with questions, with plans, with desperate hopes. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the image of that ship, an ancient beast that defied time and reason, a predator lurking in the shadows of the cosmos. The legends were real, and now they were the hunted. The command vessel hurtled through space at breakneck speed, engines blazing as they raced away from the monster. On the bridge, General Voss paced back and forth, his mind racing even faster. Every sensor was on high alert, scanning for any sign that the nightmare was following them. But the void behind remained empty, silent, as if mocking their fear. "They're gone," one of the technicians whispered, relief trembling in his voice. "It's not pursuing." Voss halted, staring at the screen with disbelief. It didn't make sense. Why would it let them go, unless it wanted them to run? It wanted them to spread the fear, to carry its legend to the farthest reaches of space. "Plot a course to High Command," Voss ordered, his voice firm despite the dread pooling in his gut. "They need to know what we're dealing with." His second-in-command hesitated, glancing nervously at him. "Sir, are you sure? If this thing really is what they say, is there anywhere we can hide?" Voss's jaw tightened. There was no hiding from a nightmare. But they could fight it, somehow. "We have to warn them. We have to stand and fight, or it will devour us all," he growled. "Now move!" The crew obeyed, and the ship's engines surged, pushing them into hyperspace. But even as they fled, Voss couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a cold shiver that crawled up his spine. It was as if the monster's eyes were still on him, even across the fabric of space and time. Hours later, they arrived at High Command, a massive orbital fortress bristling with weapons and defenses, the heart of the military's power. But for the first time in his life, Voss looked at those mighty guns and felt no safety, only dread. Nothing they had could stop the beast. Nothing. He was rushed into the war room, where admirals and generals surrounded him, faces grim and demanding answers. He told them everything, described the ship in detail, the colossal size, the crimson runes, the way it bent time and space. He spoke of its impossible power, how it tore through their defenses as if they were nothing. And he spoke of the legends, the warnings they had all dismissed as fairy tales. The room fell into stunned silence. They didn't want to believe him. He could see it in their eyes. But they couldn't deny the truth. Not when the outpost was gone, erased as if it had never existed. One of the admirals spoke, voice cold and skeptical. "You're saying this thing is alive? That it's not just a ship but a creature?" Voss hesitated, searching for words that could make sense of the nightmare. "It's not alive the way we understand it. It's ancient, older than our species, older than the stars. It's like it was forged from darkness itself." A murmur ran through the room, disbelief mingling with fear. They were the most powerful military force in the galaxy, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, and yet they were powerless against a ghost story. "We've analyzed the data from your sensors," another general said, his voice shaking slightly. "The energy readings are impossible. It's like it's powered by a singularity, a black hole engine, feeding on reality itself." Voss felt his blood run cold. A black hole engine? That wasn't just advanced technology. It was godlike. How could they fight something that bent the very fabric of existence? "It's waiting," Voss said softly, the realization hitting him. "It let us escape so we would come here, so we would gather our forces. It wants a fight." "Then we'll give it one," the admiral snapped, his voice harsh with anger. "We'll summon the entire fleet, every ship, every weapon. We'll drown this ghost in firepower." Voss opened his mouth to argue, to say that they couldn't fight something that defied reason. But he stopped himself. Maybe it was madness, but what choice did they have? If they didn't stand and fight, that monster would keep coming, hunting them across the cosmos. "Then we need to act fast," Voss said, his voice steely with determination. "Because it's coming, and it won't stop until we're all dead." Alarms blared, red lights flashing through the war room. The fortress shuddered, a low hum of energy vibrating through the walls. Voss's heart sank. It was here. It had followed them, waiting patiently for them to gather, just as he feared. The screens flickered, showing the void outside the fortress. And there it was, emerging from nothingness, massive and ancient, runes blazing like fire. The warship of nightmares, the predator of legends. It had come for them, just as it had come for the outpost. But this time they were ready. This time, they would fight. Yet, even as the fortress powered up its defenses, Voss knew the truth. They were only prolonging the inevitable. The fortress erupted into action. Sirens wailed, echoing through the corridors as soldiers scrambled to battle stations. Every gun, missile, and energy cannon powered up, targeting the monster that hung in space like a shadow. Orders were shouted, commands relayed, and the air buzzed with tension. They had never faced anything like this before, and the fear was palpable. On the bridge, General Voss stood rigid, eyes locked on the screens. The monstrous warship loomed outside, larger than life, its black hull shimmering with an unnatural energy. The crimson runes pulsed rhythmically, casting a red glow that bathed the void in an eerie light. It was waiting, as if daring them to attack. "Enemy vessel in range," the weapons officer reported, his voice cracking with nerves. "All weapons locked on target." Voss's fists clenched. They were staring down a myth, a horror that shouldn't exist. But they had no choice. If they ran, it would follow. If they hid, it would find them. Their only option was to stand and fight. "All batteries, fire at will," Voss commanded, his voice echoing with authority. "Give that thing everything we've got." The fortress roared to life, unleashing a torrent of destruction. Beams of pure energy lanced out, missiles streaked through the void, and railguns spat molten metal at hypersonic speeds. It was a display of raw power, enough to vaporize entire fleets. The darkness between them lit up with blinding flashes as the onslaught hammered into the monster. For a moment, it vanished behind the explosions, swallowed by the fury of 1,000 weapons. The bridge erupted in cheers, fists pumping the air. But Voss didn't celebrate. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, his gut churning with unease. It was too easy. It shouldn't be this easy. The smoke cleared, and the bridge fell silent. The monster was still there, untouched, unmoved. The runes along its hull flared brighter, as if mocking their attempt. Then it retaliated. Red beams erupted from its surface, thin and precise, but devastating in power. They cut through the fortress's shields like they didn't exist, slicing through armor, igniting fuel reserves, tearing holes through metal and flesh. Explosions rocked the station, sending soldiers sprawling as the floor shook beneath them. "We're taking heavy damage!" someone shouted, panic breaking through discipline. "Shields are down! Hull integrity compromised!" Voss's heart pounded. This wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Every hit was deliberate, calculated, like the monster knew exactly where to strike to maximize pain and chaos. It wasn't just fighting, it was toying with them. "Redirect all power to point defense," he yelled, gripping the console. "Focus fire on those beams. We need to disrupt its targeting," but it was futile. The monster was too fast, too powerful. It moved with a grace that defied its size, gliding through space as if it were alive. More beams lashed out, carving through the fortress, severing power conduits, igniting oxygen lines. Flames burst through corridors, screams echoing as soldiers were incinerated. Voss watched in horror as the screens went dark one by one, each camera feed dying as the monster tore the fortress apart. There was no logic to its attack, no strategy. It was pure, methodical destruction, driven by a malevolence that chilled his soul. "This is impossible," the second-in-command shouted, his face pale with fear. "No ship should be this powerful. It's not natural." Voss's jaw clenched. It wasn't a ship. It was a demon, a creature born from darkness, a hunter that defied reason. The legends were true, and they were living the nightmare. A deafening explosion shook the bridge, throwing Voss to the floor. Sparks rained down as consoles exploded, screens shattered, and the lights flickered. Emergency sirens blared, a high-pitched wail that cut through the chaos. "We've lost main power!" an engineer screamed, his voice raw with panic. "Weapons are offline! We're defenseless!" The monster moved closer, its colossal form filling the viewports, runes blazing with a hellish light. It was so close now that they could see the surface, the dark metal that writhed like living flesh. It was as if the ship were breathing, feeding on the death it created. Voss struggled to his feet, blood trickling down his face. His vision blurred, but he refused to give in to despair. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. He opened a comm channel to the fleet, his voice hoarse but defiant. "All ships, engage at will. Do not let this thing leave. Even if we fall, make it bleed!" The fleet answered, swarming around the monster like insects around a predator. They fired everything they had: missiles, lasers, kinetic rounds, pouring destruction into the beast. But it was no use. The monster absorbed their attacks, its runes glowing brighter with every impact. It was feeding on their fury, growing stronger. The void echoed with screams as the monster retaliated, beams slicing through the fleet, ships exploding in bursts of fire and debris. The nightmare was unstoppable, a force of nature that devoured everything in its path. Voss watched in helpless rage as his comrades died, one by one, their ships shattered by a myth made real. His heart broke, his spirit shattered, but he refused to surrender. If the monster wanted his soul, it would have to take it by force. The bridge shook again, metal groaning as the fortress began to collapse. Voss stood firm, eyes blazing with defiance, as the monster drew closer, its runes flashing like the eyes of a demon. It was over, but he would face his death with honor. The nightmare loomed above him, casting its shadow over the bridge, red light flooding the room. It spoke again, its voice echoing through the comms, cold and hollow, ancient and cruel. "Your courage is meaningless. Your resistance is futile. All shall fall to the darkness." And then the world turned to fire. Fire consumed the bridge, a roaring inferno that swallowed metal and flesh alike. General Voss was thrown across the room, crashing into a shattered console. Pain exploded through his body, ribs cracking, blood filling his mouth. But he forced himself to move, to push through the agony. He wouldn't die cowering on the floor, not while that monster watched. The flames flickered, struggling against the vacuum as the hull tore open. Everything was spinning, alarms screaming, sparks raining down like hellfire. Voss dragged himself to his knees, vision swimming, and looked out the viewport. The monster filled his sight, its crimson runes blazing, pulsating in rhythm like a heartbeat. It was closer now, impossibly close, staring at him, studying him. The whispers started softly, slipping into his mind like tendrils of smoke. At first they were faint, indistinct, words he couldn't understand. But they grew louder, clearer, until they echoed inside his skull, a chorus of voices that overlapped, tangled, becoming one. "You fight against the inevitable. You struggle against the darkness. But all lights burn out, and yours is fading." Voss gritted his teeth, clutching his head as pain lanced through his mind. The voices weren't just speaking. They were pushing into his thoughts, clawing at his sanity. He could feel them, cold and ancient, touching his memories, twisting them. Images flashed before his eyes. His childhood on the colony world, running through golden fields beneath twin suns. His first day in the academy, the pride in his father's eyes. The day he took command, the cheers of his crew, and then the faces of his fallen comrades, screaming as they were consumed by the monster's fire. The voices laughed, a hollow, mocking sound that vibrated through his skull. You remember them, but they are nothing. Dust in the wind, forgotten by the universe. "No," Voss roared, slamming his fist into the floor, metal cracking beneath his strength. They mattered! They fought for each other, for the light! They were heroes! The runes on the monster's hull pulsed, faster now, flashing like lightning. The shadows around it rippled, bending and twisting, forming shapes that defied reason. Faces appeared, distorted and hollow, eyes empty and mouths open in silent screams. They were the faces of his men, his friends, the soldiers who had fought and died under his command. They were reaching out to him, hands clawing through the void, faces contorted in agony. Their voices joined the chorus, echoing inside his mind, pleading, accusing. You left us, you failed us, you let us die. Voss's heart shattered, grief ripping through him, tears burning down his face. I tried to save you, he choked, his voice breaking. I did everything I could. The shadows laughed, the sound cold and cruel. Your efforts were meaningless, your courage was futile, all you did was delay the inevitable. Voss's hands trembled, rage and sorrow twisting inside him. You did this, he screamed, staring at the monster with burning hatred. You took them from me. You're the one who destroys, who devours. The monster's runes flared, and the voices grew darker, harsher. I am the end, the shadow that consumes light, the hunger that never ends. I was there before your stars were born, and I will be there when they die. Voss felt his sanity slipping, his soul being pulled into the void. The faces of his fallen soldiers were all around him now, their eyes accusing, mouths whispering his name, blaming him for their deaths. He wanted to scream, to fight, but the darkness was so cold, so heavy, it was drowning him, suffocating him. No, I won't let you take me, he gasped, clawing at the floor, struggling to hold on. But the shadows were inside him now, in his mind, in his blood. They were breaking him, piece by piece. The monster moved closer, its colossal form pressing against the shattered hull, its crimson runes so bright they burned his eyes. It opened, the shadows parting, revealing a void so deep, so empty, that it hurt to look at. It was calling to him, pulling him in. Voss's strength gave out, his body collapsing as the darkness closed around him. The faces of his fallen soldiers surrounded him, their hands reaching, pulling him into the void. He could feel them, cold and hollow, their souls trapped in the monster's grasp, forever screaming. The voices whispered to him, soft and merciless. Join them. Become one with the darkness. You cannot fight the inevitable. The last of his hope died, his spirit breaking as the shadows consumed him. His vision faded, the crimson light growing dim, replaced by cold, endless night. And then there was nothing. No light, no sound, only the darkness and the whispers that never stopped. The monster watched as the fortress crumbled, its prey devoured, its hunger momentarily sated. The runes dimmed, the shadows rippling around it, shifting, whispering. It had been a good hunt, but there was always more light to extinguish, always more souls to consume. It turned, slowly, deliberately, and vanished into the void, leaving behind nothing but shattered metal and broken dreams. The legend would live on, whispered in fear by those who survived. A warning of the warship that was no fairy tale, but a predator of nightmares. And somewhere, in the endless darkness, the voices continued to whisper. The void where the fortress once stood was silent, littered with debris and echoes of the fallen. The monster was gone, vanished into the darkness as if it had never been. But its presence lingered, a shadow that tainted the space it had consumed. Nothing remained of the fleet that had stood against it, no trace of the courage or sacrifice. Only silence, vast and hollow. But deep within that void, something stirred. A faint spark, flickering against the cold. It was small, fragile, barely more than a whisper. Yet it resisted the darkness, refused to be extinguished. It was the last remnant of General Voss's mind, his soul clinging to existence, lost within the monster's shadow. He floated in the abyss, weightless, directionless. There was no light, no warmth, only the cold that gnawed at him, freezing him from the inside out. Time had no meaning here. He didn't know how long he had been drifting, how long he had been trapped in the monster's grasp. All he knew was pain, grief, and the whispers. They were everywhere, echoing through the darkness, hollow voices that clawed at his sanity. They were his fallen soldiers, his friends, the people he had sworn to protect. They were calling to him, their voices twisted with sorrow and accusation. "You left us. You failed us. Why didn't you save us?" Voss wanted to scream, to tell them he had tried, that he had fought with everything he had. But his voice was gone, stolen by the darkness. He could only listen as the whispers grew louder, harsher, surrounding him, crushing him. The faces appeared again, hollow eyes staring at him, mouths open in silent screams. They were close now, so close he could feel their cold hands reaching for him, pulling him down into the abyss. "No, please. I'm sorry, I tried." He choked, his spirit breaking. The faces didn't care. They were lost, consumed by the monster, their souls trapped for eternity. And they wanted him to join them. The darkness tightened, pressing against him, crushing him. He could feel himself unraveling, his mind fraying as the shadows seeped into him. They were consuming him, devouring his hope, his memories, his will. It would be so easy to give in, to let go and fall into the void, to end the pain. But then a light appeared, small and distant, barely more than a flicker. It shone through the darkness, weak but unwavering, a spark of defiance. Voss's heart stirred, a faint echo of hope. He reached for it, his spirit straining, fighting against the shadows that held him. The light grew brighter, pushing back the darkness, warming him with its glow. It was a memory, a voice he knew so well. His father, standing tall and proud, looking at him with eyes full of love. "You're stronger than you know. Never give up, no matter how dark it gets." Voss felt tears burn in his eyes, his heart aching with longing. His father had been his hero, his guide, and he had died protecting his family, refusing to surrender to the enemy. He had been brave, even in the face of death. The light grew, spreading through the void, pushing back the shadows. The faces recoiled, their screams fading, their claws retreating. Voss felt strength return to him, his will reigniting. He wouldn't surrender. Not here. Not now. Not while his father's words echoed in his heart. The darkness fought back, roaring as it tried to consume him, but the light was stronger. It burned brighter, cutting through the void, shattering the shadows. Voss felt himself rising, his spirit breaking free, his mind clearing. He was still here. He was still fighting. The light exploded, flooding the darkness, burning it away. The shadows screamed, twisting and writhing, but they couldn't escape. They were consumed, erased by the light's fury. And then, just like that, they were gone. Voss opened his eyes and found himself lying on cold metal. His body ached, his head throbbed, but he was alive. Somehow, against all odds, he had survived. He looked around and realized he was on a ship, a small, battered escape pod drifting through space. The screens flickered, showing the wreckage of the fortress, the shattered remains of the fleet. The monster was gone, but its shadow still lingered, a cold presence that sent a shiver down his spine. It was still out there, waiting, hunting. But he had faced it. He had looked into the darkness and fought his way back. And he wasn't done yet. As long as he lived, he would fight. For his friends, for his fallen soldiers, for the light that still burned in his heart. Voss gripped the controls, his eyes burning with defiance. The monster was powerful, ancient, a creature of nightmares. But it could be fought. It could be defied. And someday, somehow, it could be destroyed. He was just one man, one soul against the darkness. But that was enough. Because as long as one light remained, the shadows could never truly win. General Voss drifts in a battered escape pod through a debris field, exhausted but defiant after escaping a monstrous warship. The pod's systems are failing, and he searches for survivors, finding only wreckage and grief for his fallen comrades. A faint distress beacon leads him to a damaged frigate, where he discovers Captain Myra Talon, gravely injured. Before dying, she reveals that the monster's runes are an ancient language and directs him to the archivists, keepers of forbidden knowledge. Voss journeys to the archivist's hidden world, braving a treacherous nebula filled with haunting illusions of his dead comrades. He confronts his guilt and grief, finding strength in memories of his father. Upon reaching the planet, he meets the Keeper of Memories, who explains the monster, the Devourer, is an ancient curse, a being of hunger and darkness that consumes souls. To defeat it, Voss must break its curse by deciphering the runes in the Hall of Shadows. Inside the hall, Voss faces visions of his fallen soldiers, reliving his guilt and sorrow. Overcoming his inner darkness, he unlocks the rune's meaning, discovering the curse that binds the monster. With newfound resolve, he recites a counter-curse, banishing the Devourer back to the void and freeing the trapped souls. Exhausted but victorious, Voss finds peace, knowing the nightmare is over. The monster is gone, his men are free, and the light has triumphed over darkness.